Alex, I've got like 30 tabs open in Chrome right now.
I have not quite that many, but
Oh
I
my!
have something.
What have you done?
I started using the Google Hangout toolbox, which lets me do things like throw a lower third down, or do dumb overlays, or maybe do possibly the worst, most awful thing possible, like this.
I've show is canceled.
Yeah,
Show is
rightfully so.
canceled. I don't want
Rightfully
anything to do
so.
with this anymore. You've
Yes.
ruined it.
Good.
You
Yes, I'm glad
ruined
I
it.
have, in fact, completely destroyed. I destroy everything I create, and I'm glad I've continued this trend.
Well, at least when people ask, "Hey, what do you guys do all day?" We have successfully answered that question. I'm sure everyone is now much happier to know what's
We
going
make
on.
a lot of mistakes, pretty much, nonstop.
So it's been a busy week.
God, has it ever been? Yeah, and we
Even
aren't
if
even
you,
at TGS.
yeah, even if you put aside that it's Grand Theft Auto week, uh, yeah, TGS is going on. There was a, well, I don't know. Has anything really come out of TGS that's really all that noteworthy?
No, just trailers and stuff. I mean, it's a lot of expected things that we kind of knew about for the most part. Little tidbits here and there, like Sony continuing to push the notion that maybe the Last Guardian is still out there somewhere existing, waiting for the right time to strike, things
Oh,
like
did they
that.
say something?
They did today, apparently. So I think Shuhei Yoshida said
What?
something today about like we are waiting for the right time to reintroduce it or something to that effect. So,
Oh man,
but
they're waiting for the first sign of the apocalypse, and then now is the time to reveal the Last
yes,
Guardian.
so they're waiting for that stuff. But other than that, it seems like it's kind of been just the general kind of stuff that we thought would be coming out of TGS.
Someone went to a trade show, asked about the Last Guardian. Drink.
I just did. I'm drinking. Much better.
Sadly, too early to have any alcohol. Although I could probably mix that in a coffee and no one would know. Um,
I mean, it's like 10:30. I could have a drink, I
that's
suppose.
true. That's true. I'll just go on your time.
Yeah.
Um,
Why not?
so you actually you saw a bunch of games that some embargoes are now up for.
Yeah, I did.
You saw Batman, right?
I did. I saw Batman Arkham Origins. Before anyone asked, no, not the handheld version. Sorry, can't tell you anything about that yet.
Mm.
But I did play the console version, and I can in fact confirm that it is totally Batman.
What does that What does that mean though? Is that you mean that in a good way or?
I do
or,
for the most
okay.
part. Yeah, like what I played of it seemed a lot like what I played in Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. It's the same combat system, more or less. They've added and tweaked a few things here and there. It's the same basic visual style and presentation, same sort of over-the-shoulder third-person camera. They've obviously made some changes. There is the premise, which is the early Batman stuff, him going up against all these different assassins in Arkham, in not Arkham, in Gotham City before he's really gotten his feet completely wet into the superhero game. And it's what I played of it, I liked. I like those Batman games a lot. This is a different studio, but it doesn't feel like it's really lost anything in that transition, other than just kind of maybe a small bit of freshness, just because it is kind of the same thing for a third time.
I mean, that was more my concern. I didn't, I figured this was probably gonna be pretty similar to, what happened with the Call of Duty franchise, where the ones that were handed off to Treyarch, not as, at least initially, not as good as what Infinity Ward was putting out, but to the average Joe, maybe not noticing the difference. And so it's not so much that I thought that handing this off to WB Montreal was gonna end up with a noticeable dip in quality, except that it wouldn't surprise me if it was more of an incremental push forward as opposed to a bunch of brand new ideas trying to shake up what we expect from a Batman game.
Yeah, the things they've changed is just the boss fights are a little bit different. So because you're kind of going one-on-one with a lot of these assassins, you're involved in a lot of fights that are more based around the sort of standard combat. You're not just doing like the kind of you're kind of going one-on-one with the one they showed with Deathstroke. The first time you end up fighting him, and he has a lot of the same moves you do. So it's this constant back and forth of reversals and timing-based moves and stuff, and it's got a nice flow to it. They've definitely nailed the nuances of that combat system that Rocksteady obviously kind of brought to bear. And they're using the universe well. Like the early level they showed, it showed an early rendition of the Penguin. Before he was kind of like the criminal overlord in Gotham. He was just a weapons dealer, I guess, that lived on this ship that existed out in international waters and would just come to town anytime he wanted to do a deal or whatever. So you see him kind of like in the early stages of his career when he's like starting to try and take over a little bit more of the crime in Gotham. He's torturing one of the Falcone sons, so they're tying all that stuff together in a pretty nice way. And I think that, I mean, again, they only showed like one level and one boss fight and stuff, but I got to actually sit down and play it, and it felt right. It felt kind of what you want a Batman game, one of those Batman games at least, to feel like. So I came away pretty okay with it.
This doesn't matter to me as much, but I know it was sort of an important thing when we started hearing about the game, was that the voices are different for some of the main characters. Batman's a different voice actor.
Yes.
Joker's a different voice actor. Is that those were pretty defining voices for them. Maybe not to the extent of Nolan North to Uncharted, but definitely defining characteristics. Does that bother you at all, or did you even notice it when you were playing
I noticed that the Batman voice was a little bit different, but I mean, it's still someone who sounds like Batman doing a Batman voice, so
okay.
It didn't. I mean, they're going for a younger Batman, and it does sound like a younger Batman. So I can't sit there and find too much fault with that because it sounds kind of what you would expect that character to sound like. But the guy who plays the Penguin, I'm pretty sure, is exactly the same. They didn't show any of the Joker stuff, if there is any Joker stuff, so I don't know like what his dude sounds like. But
wait, wasn't Nolan North the Penguin?
Was he? I don't know. If he is, he's pretty good. It's a pretty good Penguin voice.
Yeah. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he did. Well, the Penguin voice sounds exactly the same. So there you go. Hot scoops. Penguin voice, the same.
So, I mean, it sounds like another Batman game. But it's weird because in a fall that's going to have so many things to play and my backlog continues to pile up and I've barely made a dent in Grand Theft Auto, it's not wouldn't completely shock me if that game kind of fell to the side a little bit. I don't know how it falls in the release schedule. I guess that's what kind of the defining factor is. Where does that, if it falls somewhere where there's not much else going on, then maybe I want to play that because that's the thing out that week. But other than that, I'm not. I don't know. I guess I'm just not that hyped for it. I think it's probably going to be a pretty solid game. I'm just, usually, with the last two, could not wait for those games to drop, and I definitely don't really have that feeling with the new one.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's definitely going to. I definitely feel like
try and keep a straight face as long as possible.
Hey, I don't even know what you're talking about, to be honest with you, but yeah, it is unfortunate. It does seem like a game that's going to kind of fall by the wayside a little bit, which is too bad. But if nothing else, it is a prequel game. It's not. They're not advancing the story on what they've already done. So I feel like they're just trying to this is them trying to establish that they can have two studios working on that franchise. And if this one doesn't necessarily do as good as the other ones, I don't feel like it's necessarily going to kill the franchise or it's really going to suffer at all for it. So I think it'll be fine. I think Arkham Origins will be fine. So that was my takeaway from that.
Fair enough. Anything else that you checked out at the?
Yeah. God. All right. I'm gonna go over these relatively quickly because there are a bunch. I played. Was it Lego Marvel Heroes or Marvel Superheroes, whatever that is. The open world Marvel superhero game that Lego was doing. Which is weird because they also showed the DC Scribblenauts game at the same time. So there were Marvel and DC things both being pushed by Warner Brothers, which is always super weird to me. But I mean, honestly, the Lego Marvel game looks super cute, super fun. They have a ton of different heroes in it. It's all voice acted, which has kind of become the thing with Lego. But they have gotten a lot of the existing Marvel voice actors, like for the games and stuff, to come in and do the Lego one. So like Nolan North is doing Deadpool in the Lego Marvel game, which is pretty great. I think he's cursing a lot less, but other than that, it's kind of that same thing.
It's a nice touch.
Yeah, but it looks really nice. It's a nice open world game. There's a ton of different it goes all the way down to like weird, obscure, like there are Excalibur characters in that game. Like there are all sorts of like weird, Marvel Obscura kind of tossed in there. And it's good. It seems like it's definitely in the vein of the Lego games we like versus the Lego games that kind of didn't work. So I came away good on that one. And then I saw it, though it's out next week, so I mean I'm sure we'll have a quick look soon enough. But the DC Scribblenauts game,
Is that already coming out? I don't know.
That's out next week.
All the Scribblenauts games just sort of
they just and then they just kind of appear and you're not sure where they came from and all of that. Yeah. And this, I mean, to be fair, looks exactly like a Scribblenauts game. It is totally a Scribblenauts game. It's just that they have an encyclopedic roster of DC characters to the point where there are like Marvel has some obscure in it, but man, the DC game has apparently every noteworthy and mostly not worthy characters ever like shown in any DC. Like I started going down a list of just like random. Okay, who are the most obscure DC? Like I threw out the name Arm Fall Off Boy, who is actually a character in the DC universe.
Is that like a punk band, like a spin-off of Fall Out Boy?
No, it's a character whose entire power was that his limbs would fall off. And guess what? He's in the game.
Man, that sounds great. I want to say that I saw like one of the developers talking about that game, and their challenge was, I dare you to throw out a character that is not in here, because they guaranteed that they would be in there, and it seems like maybe they have risen to that challenge.
We could not stump them. It was like all the weird versions of Batman and other Batman characters. Like there are tons of different variations. There's just is a crazy number of characters. But then again, it's also all in a Scribblenauts game. So you like Scribblenauts games, this is great. If you don't, there's not really anything super different or noteworthy to change your mind there. So
I do like Scribblenauts games. I loved Scribblenauts games. The first two were some of my favorites of the years that they came out, but
I like the first one.
Holy shit, I'm tired of those games.
Yeah.
And I feel bad saying that because like I really like Fifth Cell. I like what I thought what they were trying to do with, what was it, Hybrid was the shooter that they put out.
Yeah.
They're a cool company, and if they're using Scribblenauts as a means to kind of do the other stuff they want to do and like kind of work that stuff out in private, that's fine. Do your business, but I find myself charmed at the trailers for these new games, but I don't have any interest in playing another one ever again.
There's a certain element that I feel like has been lacking the last couple ones, which is, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what to put my finger, because I think it's just that they are so the same kind of like video game playset mentality. Like the game parts of the Scribblenauts games have never been my favorite parts at all. It's just the weird creative shit that kind of exists around the stuff that you're theoretically supposed to be doing to progress. And so this doesn't seem like what they showed didn't really seem to change any of my opinions on that stuff. It seemed like it was still kind of the same basic idea of, yeah, there's some game objectives, but look at all the things you can make. Which, great, that's awesome. I don't really like DC that much, so it doesn't, that isn't necessarily a huge selling point for me. But I'm sure if, you do like DC Comics and you do like Scribblenauts, that will be, the most fun thing ever. So
if you're one of those people,
yes,
that
if you're one of those
slice of demographic that if you really love Scribblenauts and you really love DC and you don't like Marvel,
if you are this highly specific demographic, this is the game for you. So
all right.
Good on that one.
Was there anything else there of note?
No, so there was nothing else at that event, but I just went to another thing yesterday, all too briefly, because I was already out for another appointment. I was like, well, I should stop by and see this. And the only reason I really went was because I kind of wanted to play the new Adventure Time game, which...
Right.
Yeah. Which, I don't know, I'm a big dumb fan of that show. I didn't really love the last game they put out, the 3DS one. I thought it kind of... I don't know, I feel like it just didn't have a whole lot going for it. This one is a dungeon crawler, straight up. It's like a co-op dungeon crawler. I believe it's digital only. And it's simple, but it's actually pretty fun. There's a bunch of different playable characters in it. My girlfriend will be stoked because you can totally play as Lumpy Space Princess. And it's it's cute. It's fun. All the characters have like weird, highly referential special powers. It's got all the kind of basic tenets of what you would want from that kind of game with an Adventure Time theme. So I was pretty into that. Other than that, they had a couple other things. The only other thing I really sat down and watched and played a little of was Earth Defense Force 2025, which is totally Earth Defense Force if you've ever played any of those games. I have.
I loved the early one that came out on Xbox 360. Before, not like, oh God, I'm gonna get the timeline.
2017 was the first one, I think.
I think so. And then there was like the one that was kind of westerned up, where they tried to make the controls better and a bunch of things, and that one wasn't that great. I passed on that one. I don't know if this one's supposed to be any good or not. Although like good is the wrong term to use for these games because I think they're fun, but when you break down them mechanically, like all sorts of things fall apart. But it's
Oh
just
yeah, no,
the scope and the scale and the B-moviness and the weirdness. Like it all kind of comes together in a way that is really endearing, I guess, is the word I would use for that franchise.
They're intentional disasters to a certain degree.
Sure.
Because they're throwing all these things in there that kind of don't work, but they kind of know they don't work. So, but that's half the fun, is watching all the things not really like work right. Like the giant monsters like constantly glitching out and animations being all fucked up, and the buildings like causing all sorts of like weird accidental chaos when they come down and that kind of stuff. And this has all of that. Plus, 2-player co-op, 4-player online. So, hey, if you want to get together and just shoot some giant fucking ants, you totally can with your friends. And I don't know, it seemed fine. It seemed like it was Defense Force. They made more of it, so
yeah.
There you go. That's kind of all I went to see this week. There's some other stuff coming up here soon enough. I think there's like an Ubisoft event in a couple of weeks, so I may get to see even more Assassin's Creed 4 and maybe some other things. We'll see.
Well, they'll just sit you down and make you watch all the trailers they've put out.
God, I hope so. That would be great, because that would
maybe
be
you can watch those trailers under embargo. Right? Like, hey,
7 hours worth of trailers.
I don't want to see anything more of any of their lineup.
Just put them out.
Unless we're talking about South Park. I'd like to get bombarded with South Park trailers. So
I
they could just
sure do
shift
hope.
Gears.
Sure do hope they have something to say about that game soon. Cause,
there's no way that game comes out this year.
I want it to.
It seems like we're getting way too late for that to be a...
They were talking before like it was going to be out this holiday, and people were telling me that game was like almost done. I don't know what the hell they're waiting for.
Wouldn't be surprised if it was almost done. It seems odd to have not picked a date. Otherwise it makes me greatly fear that they're going to give it the November treatment, which is,
bad.
That game will do poorly in November.
Yeah, that's too bad. But I hope it. I still hope it comes out soonish. So
sure.
We'll see. What have you been playing, man? What have you been up to?
Well, I managed to strike. My heart is no longer stressed out. I managed to finish both Amnesia, Machine for Pigs, and Outlast this week. My wife was out of town with a friend, and it was like, this is the week I'm going to strike both of these off of my pile. I'd actually managed to be about halfway through Amnesia, and it was about an hour from the end of Outlast, so I didn't have a whole lot to surmount. So I played Amnesia kind of on my own. I'd only intended to play about an hour. It's kind of like the slice that I can handle of those games.
Right.
Before it becomes a little too nerve-wracking, but after I played an hour, I was kind of in a rhythm, and I could, I knew I was not that close to the end, but I could kind of see it, so I said, screw it, I'm going to just kind of run the distance on this one. And so finished the Machine for Pigs, which I'll be writing more about in October, but so the short analysis is that if you were looking for a game as terrifying as The Dark Descent, Machine for Pigs is not it. But I also think it has different aims. I don't believe it was trying. I don't think its mandate was let's try and outdo The Dark Descent in terms of scares. I did think they failed pretty spectacularly in their enemy design and the way that you kind of encounter sort of the main pig creature without going into too much about how that actually works. I just don't think that worked very well. But other than that, it tells a phenomenal story that is just dripping with the grossest imagery in the writing, and they do this really spectacular job of punching above their weight with the atmosphere and the writing. And the only times that it becomes apparent that you're playing a game from the crew that made Dear Esther is when like you go outside and there's a cityscape, and it just becomes like very apparent that this is a small team that is not capable of pulling off a scale that they are kind of trying to present.
Right.
But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Dark Descent is probably, better in a lot of respects. I don't know if I'd go better game because once you start getting the mechanics, it's a more interesting game, I would at least say. But the Machine Pigs is totally worth playing, and it's vastly different than Outlast, which has a really disappointing end game that I don't think pans out very well and isn't very scary. And also Outlast eventually stops being all that tense, except for the moments where it's cheap about it, because Outlast is largely a haunted house. When you go into a haunted house, it's about people jumping out of a corner and scaring you, and then recovering from that. And that's all Outlast is a haunted house where there are jump scares, because there's only a couple of moments where it tries to build real natural tension outside of those scares, where either the scare is prompted by a genuine surprise, or because you're getting chased and trying to get to wherever you're trying to take a key. But I still really enjoyed it. I really like games that or horror games that don't have any combat, and both of these are well worth playing for pretty different reasons. But yeah, I'll be writing more about them. I'm trying to set up some interviews, and I got some other stuff in the works for October. So I'll probably sit down and maybe just write a proper review of both those games at some point, because Brad's starting this trend of writing reviews several weeks after the games come out. So
it's a trend I'm thinking about picking up. I'm thinking about maybe just from now, like I got NBA 2K14 now, like 2 weeks ahead of release, but I might just not put that review up until like November, because I mean, honestly, why not? Why even bother trying to do stuff in a timely fashion? Doesn't seem like it has much point to it.
No, I don't want to be a hipster.
No.
Like, I feel like when you hit the embargo, it's ahead of the game's release. You're being a hipster video game reviewer, and I got enough hipster
whatever,
problems.
man. I reviewed that on launch date. God, it's like fuck that, man. No, do shit when you want, man. Let it flow. Review it when you feel it. Is what I feel.
So I played those last night. I've kind of got a ritual now where I'm playing a couple of stages of Rayman Legends in bed before I go to sleep. I've just got the Wii U kind of tucked into my bedroom, and I kind of bang out a level or two before I hit the sack. And man,
it's a good pace.
I am genuinely shocked at how much I enjoy the touchscreen levels. So I'm playing it on Wii U, and they are like, I get super excited when it's like, all right, I get to press the screen and what's his name? I don't know what the little creature is called.
Oh, which one? Murphy?
Yeah. Whenever like I run into an obstacle, it's like Murphy time. I'm like, hell yeah, it's Murphy time. I mean, there's something about it, like they built these stages, because the touchscreen on the Wii U gamepad is not very good.
No, it's not great.
And you learn that even in Nintendo's custom-built interface all the time. And it's not that, and it's especially blatant when I'm using an iPhone every day and an iPad every day. It becomes so clear what the technical limitations of the screen they chose were. But when I do these touchscreen levels in Rayman Legends, I never have any trouble pulling off exactly what I need to do, and it's really fun to do it. And I know you said that these levels are in the other versions. The Vita one, it makes sense. There's a touchscreen, but I can't imagine they are nearly as like. How do they even work?
I watched the quick look of them playing the, I guess the Xbox version or whatever, and it's just button presses. You're doing button presses, and especially in the situations where it's fun. It's not as bad when you're just like moving a platform or something like that. Like it's not as, but when you're doing that thing where you actually have to draw on the screen to like draw a path for the character like through some sort of muck or whatever, like the fact that it just creates a circular path around it automatically is the worst, because you actually having to draw that correctly is like half the fun of that whole thing. And yeah, I don't think that the console version does that stuff very well, it seems like.
Yeah, and so yeah, I've been playing it on the gamepad, and it's just it was hard to imagine a game being more beautiful than Origins, because that was easily the most phenomenal looking 2D game I'd seen in a long time, and somehow Legends is even more astounding in just about every way. I think largely it has to do with just how much is going on in the backgrounds. Like there is just a ton of different things to look at and see, and they smartly keep it in the background so you can focus on what's happening right in front of you. It doesn't distract from the platforming in any real meaningful way as far as the first world is concerned. And yeah, and then I got to the first music stage, which just my entire brain, when I started to realize what was going on, I was like, wait, that's a riff I know. That's a riff I know. And then the characters are jumping out of the screen and singing along, and I feel like I'm in a Pixar movie, and just on what, man.
And it's still it's not nearly as hard as it seems like it should be, right? Because like once you kind of get in tune that like you're jumping and you're moving with the music, you get into a rhythm with it with the music, and it's just like I got hit a point where up until the last one of those, I didn't die on any of them, because like the way they've timed all the movements with the music is so on point, and so just like you can actually kind of predict it a little bit. If you're at all attuned to rhythm games, like it totally blocks into that really, really well. And mechanically, I think those are my favorite levels of the entire game.
Yeah, they're. I'm just genuinely shocked at it's an even better platforming game than Origins was. Just fundamentally, but then the ideas they've built on top of the platformer, finding different ways to structure levels, are just so genuinely surprising and fun to play. That even though I'm enjoying the platforming stages, you know, the fact that I'm excited for a touchscreen stage in a precision platformer,
right?
Crazy. Like
right.
that goes against, you know, most of the logic I bring to other platformers. You know, I hate the Little Big Planet series, not because it isn't super charming and really well made, but the physics are terrible and I can't stand them. And it seems like Puppeteer also suffers from some similar issues. So the fact that I would be playing Rayman and then be excited to lose all control except for when I'm swiping at the screen is just, every time it came up, I was just like, I can't believe I am enjoying this as much as I am.
Agreed. Totally agree.
So, you know, I feel like they have taken, well, I feel like they've taken this sort of take on Rayman as far as they can possibly take it. But then again, I probably would have said that with Origins as well. So, while I would certainly love to see Michel Ancel make another Rayman game, I'd also, you know, I'm kind of secretly hoping he'll get a chance to go do whatever. At this point, if it's Beyond Good and Evil 2, I don't care.
You just want to see him do something different.
Yeah, I'd love to do him. I feel like he has taken this to the sort of past the logical extension and has surprised me in so many ways that, you know, I'd like to see him take, you know, a U-turn and maybe do something else. But who knows? If he makes another Rayman, it's not like it's not going to end up on my end of the year list somehow.
Oh, sure.
Because he is so damn good at doing them, apparently.
It's pretty amazing that franchise has been revived the way it has, because, I mean, how many years did we go just not giving a fuck about Rayman outside of that whole Raving Rabbids thing that, you know, maybe went on a little too long?
And even he started that, right? He worked on that initial Wii game, which, you know, I didn't play it, but, you know, the people that did said it was charming, and for what it was better than it probably should be. And, you know, maybe that just kind of seems like his MO, like, which in some ways is a little bit sad, but in other ways it's really great that he seems to just sort of take whatever challenge is in front of him and make the best of it. You know, he made a terrific King Kong game. Like, that was a launch game. Yeah, and that was a launch game too. So it just seems like you throw him in with the Lions, and he will come out with something wonderful.
He will make way better things than he has any right to be making with what you are offering him. So yeah, for sure.
What a weird career.
Now here's the question before we move on to news. Did you get to play any Grand Theft Auto 5 this week?
I did. I probably 3 or 4 hours, and then as of last night,
about 5 myself. So yeah.
My Xbox started doing some red ringing nonsense.
Oh no.
I'm not that worried about it. My brother's got an Xbox in the house that he never uses, so I will just swap that out where I've got things set up here, because I'm not about to go purchase another one of those. I will probably buy I have a second year Xbox. Mine crapped out the first year. I've had this since the year after launch. So the fact that it's just dying now is actually pretty remarkable, especially considering I just started getting into PC gaming about 6 months ago. So otherwise I was using that Xbox all the damn time. But I'd like to get a slim or, you know, a nice black one just so I can play the games that won't be compatible. Well, that's all of them. But I'll wait until the Xbox One is out, and then I'll start driving the price down on the used versions of those machines. So in any case, I have played about 4 hours. I find myself surprisingly sort of bored, but I'm also really early. I haven't gotten too deep into it, so that's sort of a broad stroke impression of the first couple hours.
The early goings of GTA games are never the most interesting. Like there's a lot of setup work that goes into that stuff, to the point, like I would say an excessive amount of setup for some of that stuff. This one is not really any different. You know, the things that have struck me so far are, one, holy shit, the world really is that huge. Yeah. Like the scope of it is immediately palpable and very, very impressive. The soundtrack and the visual style and all that stuff is totally cohesive, really well done, really fantastic. Mission-wise, you know, I'm about 5 hours in. I'm just starting to start to get to the meat of the actual story and where things are headed.
So you had a heist yet? Because I know that's sort of like the first pivotal
I have not had a full heist yet. I have had the introduction to the idea that heists will be coming. So that's sort of, you know, I'm kind of at that point. What I will say about it is that there are parts that I have been genuinely amused by. There have been parts where I have just kind of been annoyed at how shouty and shrill a lot of the characters are. I'm not talking about, this is not a gender-specific thing. Everybody is shouting at everybody in that goddamn game, and I totally forgot. I think GTA 4 was not as bad about this, with the exception of certain characters, but a lot of GTA games are really about guys yelling at everybody. Like, everybody, it's just endless just shouting. And, it was funny for a while, but I also realized that the GTA games have never been very nuanced when it comes to, its humor. It's always just sort of like very brazen satire and very brazen, loud, sweary kind of just, angry nonsense, which, for a long time has worked in its favor. Now I'm kind of starting to realize that maybe, the sort of lack of, tonal difference anywhere in the storytelling and in the joke telling is maybe starting to wear on me a little bit. Apart from that, though, I mean, honestly, like I said, there have been several bits that totally got me to laugh. Some of the stuff with Michael's family, despite being just ungodly loud, has been funny. Some of the stuff with the son has been very funny. And I actually like the Franklin character a decent amount. I think that while they are kind of retreading on some of the gangster tropes that they did in San Andreas already, so far I have enjoyed his character, and I have enjoyed his friend Lamar, and I kind of like some of the stuff they've been playing with his stuff. So I'm kind of curious to see where that stuff goes over time. It seems fun. It seems like a lot of fun. Most of the missions I've done have been pretty solid, though definitely leaning a lot of the same mechanics that they have been leaning on for a very long time. So it's not so much fresh as it is just kind of like familiar. Maybe not in the best way possible.
Yeah, Franklin definitely seems like he's the surrogate for the player in a lot of ways, where oftentimes when things are going crazy, and again, this is pretty early, I'm not sure how the character pans out, but it just seems like early on there's a whole lot of... can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, the screen went weird for a second.
No,
he's going aloud like, look at this crazy shit. Look at this motherfucker. Like, this... What are we doing? Like, he seems to be, at least early on, a little bit of that, like, that's kind of how the player is responding sometimes to the actions on screen, and he sort of projects that for you, which I think is a lot of fun. And really, like, as someone that lived in LA for close to 2 years, like, the world they have built, like, whatever criticisms you have of the content, the jokes, the characters, whatever, like, the world is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that it's this close to actual LA in the sense that if you've been there, just visited, especially if you've lived there, like, you can recognize, like, general layouts and neighborhoods, and it's unbelievable. Like, even just being on the Santa Monica Pier and thinking, like, well, I wonder if they put in the restaurant that's all the way at the end of the pier on the right-hand side. I wonder if they put in the arcade that's got, kind of in the middle. I wonder if they've got the section that goes off to the parking garage at the other end of the pier. Like, yeah, like, all that stuff is there. Like, it's not one-to-one, but it's like an uncanny valley version of Los Angeles, where when you look at it, it's like, yeah, this is Los Angeles, but it's not. But it's just enough that, I'm not necessarily using my knowledge of the city to get around, but I am continually just sort of blown away at the level of detail brought to trying to bring this city to life. They do just enough that you're in Los Angeles, but never enough that it doesn't stop them from sort of doing what they want in order to accommodate the world that they want to create for their characters and their missions. It's just, I don't know. I guess this is maybe the feeling that people had who are from New York when they started seeing New York realized in these games and in other games. I'm curious to see how I feel when Watch Dogs comes out, because games just don't recreate Chicago, and that's going to be I think the first time in a long time where a big open world game has simulated Chicago. And yeah, it's a really strange feeling, but one that is very cool.
Yeah, you're dead on about the New York thing. Like, a while ago, I went back and I started just kind of driving around GTA 4 after I moved here, and just started, like, looking for locations and stuff to kind of pick out. And it's pretty amazing the amount of stuff that they actually managed to shove in there. And I have certainly recognized my share of LA stuff in there as well, despite not being as familiar with the city as I am New York. But the thing, I sort of lost my train of thought, but what I was going to say was that just, in terms of detail and just structure and creating a playground, to just do the most random weird shit possible, I love the Saints Row games, but in terms of like breadth of that stuff and scope, it's like you kind of can't touch what Rockstar North does with that shit. It's kind of unbelievable, and I've already lost like at least a solid hour and a half of just driving around looking at stuff, not really doing anything of any note or whatever. And I've even gone and done some of like the dumb activities. Like I actually went and sat through an entire movie in the game. Those things I haven't watched all of them yet, but the one I saw was this like cartoon about some British robot, and it was the most fucked up thing I have seen in quite a while. Like that, it was some beyond John Crickfalusi style fucking dark ass animation, just nasty stuff. Just total savaging of the kind of like of just like the irrelevance of the British like middle class white male, basically, as with a robot as a surrogate for that. Not the funniest satire, but definitely the most savage I've seen from anything in that game thus far. And I'm kind of curious what the other movies are going to be like, because I guess at this point I'll actually go watch them, because that one totally kept me enraptured despite being how fucked up it was.
And one of the things I've noticed early on, and I've not gone back to GTA 4, but this is one of my enduring memories of GTA 4, is that it was so easy to get a 1 star. It was so easy for the cops to start chasing you. I felt like when I was going around the city, I was on pins and needles, where if I bashed into somebody on the freeway or like going through Times Square, it was so easy to have to then spend the next 2 minutes losing the cops or screwing up and then raising your star level. And in the first 4 hours of GTA 5 that I've played, I haven't had a situation. I've had horrible car wrecks, awful car wrecks in the middle of traveling between missions, and not alerted the police at all. And so, I'm not quite sure if that's something they've tweaked, or if that's just me building up something that annoyed me towards the end of GTA 4. But I do remember in 4 just it being so much easier to start an alert status, and in this one, they definitely seem, for better or worse, based on some of the tracks they've taken in the past with kind of trying more serious stories. They definitely are allowing a better sense of playfulness in this one that allows you to get away with a little bit. I
think they've also spread the cops out a lot more, possibly because the world is so gigantic. Because I've actually had a cop see me stealing a car, and then my wanted level immediately shot up. And I've had a couple of car wrecks near cops where my wanted level immediately went up. But I think the cops are just spread out much more around the world. So it's not like you're instantaneously just going to have the cops on you if you start wrecking shit.
And maybe I am an idiot, but it took me like 3 solid hours to get grips on how to drive those cars. Like the physics and the handling struck me. Really? You got it right off the bat?
No, I got it within like 10 minutes. I was like, okay, things are a little squirrely here and there, but I kind of got a feel. I mean, I don't mind just kind of wrecking into shit anyway, so that might be the difference. But I tend to play these games with a little bit more of a devil may care attitude of just fuck it, whatever. If I crash into shit, I crash into shit. I'm not really that worried about doing well so much as I am just kind of doing whatever I feel like.
Sure.
But I mean, I feel like I can handle most of the cars, with the exception of some of the like really fast sport rides and stuff, without just constantly darting around and kind of getting all squirrely without trying. So I don't think it's that bad. I think it's just you.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to playing more, and I think at this point, now that like we're getting out of the first week frenzy, I know how long that game is. I'm not going. Often I like to start a game and finish a game before I move on to the next one. Right. And I think doing that with Grand Theft Auto would stress me out.
Because you're not going to get through that game in a while. It's going to take some time.
So I think Grand Theft Auto, I'm just going to start to kind of just chip at it. And I expect that I'll probably get through it sometime in October. But I'm not going to worry too much about actually, like, man, I need to get through the next 40 hours so I can get ready for what's coming up next. But I am enjoying it, and I do that's why when I said I was bored, as you pointed out, it's the early parts of Grand Theft Auto. I just haven't gotten to anything particularly crazy. I also, maybe you can flip it off in the options. I need to look, but the auto aim is so egregious in this game that I don't even know. It's almost like why even let me shoot things? Because all I have to do is duck out of combat, and I've got a headshot on everybody every single time.
Yeah, you can turn it off.
Okay, I need to at least turn that down, because it just seems completely goofy when I'm in a shootout. And I don't even, A, the radar is showing me where everyone is, and then B, it doesn't matter because I can just look out and fire away, and the guy has great aim, and he's auto-aiming, and he's going to take that guy out. So I might at least dial that down a notch if that is a possibility. I need to look and see what's going on there. But
speaking of what's going on, maybe we should talk about some news.
Is there a sound effect for a transition? Do you have something for that? Look at me putting you on the spot. Okay, good. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that works.
That's all I got, really. Sorry.
There's a lot happened this week.
Yeah.
I've been yapping, so why don't you kick us off with something?
I don't know. I mean, we could talk a little bit about the death of Hiroshi Yamauchi, who was the Nintendo president for many years.
1949 to 2002, if memory serves correctly.
He is the man who he was there when Nintendo was still a card company, before it became like the video game juggernaut that it is. He's the one who sort of had the vision to kind of help guide it in that direction. Never really a big public-facing figure. Like, he would certainly, talk to stockholders, and he would kind of, get out there and do some promotional stuff for the company's game systems. But he was always more of a behind-the-scenes guy. You never really saw him do a ton of interviews or a ton of, definitely not the way Satoru Iwata does it.
But when he did say things, I mean, he was famous for saying, I guess infamous for saying some really crazy things. Like, I'm pulling this up on Wikipedia, so, take it with a grain of salt, but I've definitely heard some of these referenced in the past. But so like one of these people who play RPGs are depressed gamers who like to sit alone in their dark rooms and play slow games. The DS represents a critical moment for Nintendo's success over the next 2 years. If it succeeds, we rise to the heavens. If it fails, we sink into hell.
Some real good, like samurai-ass Japanese businessman type stuff, like that.
He said what was on his mind,
Yeah.
He famously barely played video games, and would, he approved a lot of the concepts that went into production at Nintendo, and just did it, based on gut. And he's responsible for, if you're not a big fan of what Nintendo does these days, you were certainly a fan of Nintendo at the time that Yamauchi was. At the helm, and he is responsible for enabling and allowing some of Nintendo's highest highs, at least creatively. And he was an unorthodox businessman of that era, and even of this era, if he was still around and in charge of Nintendo. And yeah, I'm not sure there's enough kind things you can say about what he did for the industry. I mean, we have him to thank for having a modern video game industry.
Totally.
And so certainly our thoughts are with those who knew him at Nintendo, and definitely rest in peace, Mr. Yamauchi.
Hell of a legacy he left behind, and if you're looking for anecdotes on stuff, there's a few different books out there that have some things about Yamauchi. The Harold Goldberg's book, All Your Base Are Belong to Us. Sorry about the title, is actually a very good read and has some really good early Nintendo anecdotes featuring Yamauchi and some of his early exploits working with Miyamoto and Gunpei Yokoi and all those early Nintendo figures. There's a lot of good info out there about how he kind of ran the company and helped build a lot of that stuff up. So I would certainly suggest looking around and digging some of that stuff up.
I think it's called Game Over. Was another video game book that has a long stretches talking about Nintendo's history in the 90s that has a lot of anecdotes and interesting stories about Yamauchi. So I'd recommend that one as well. I need to reread that book.
I haven't read that one. I've been meaning to for a long time, but I will at some point.
Yeah.
Patrick, what do you got?
So Atlus is now a part of Sega.
Yes, it is.
The most recent update to that. So anyone that isn't aware, Atlus and its parent company in Japan embroiled in a whole lot of stuff that was not, the result of Atlus as a video game company doing poorly, but it basically meant that Atlus as a video game company needed to be spun off to someone else to avoid sinking down. And so Sega picked them up. And since then, there's been a lot of hand-wringing about what this means for the company, what role do they have at Sega, and so Sega put out a sort of a statement that Game Informer translated from Sega Sammy. I forgot Sega Sammy. Jesus. CEO Nato Hirokawa said, "I'd like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude for your support of Atlus products. Atlus has consistently received support and praise from our faithful and our respected customers and made great progress in recent years. So the recent incident must have surprised and worried you all dearly. For that, I'd like to express my deepest apologies." And so, I mean, I don't know how much that says necessarily about what that means for Atlus going forward, but what I hope it means is that Atlus gets to retain some sort of independence and allow. I don't know if that means that Atlus becomes a sub-brand or if they are completely folded into Sega, and I don't know what that means for the U.S. branch of Atlus, which was kind of doing things very different.
Right.
They kind of forged their own identity separate from Atlus Japan. They were doing Persona and all the stuff that was coming from Atlus Japan, but things like Xenoclash were being funded by them. Xenoclash and Xenoclash 2 are some of my favorite games of the last couple of years. It's hard to imagine a company like Sega funding a game like that and getting behind a game like that, but this is a case where I would love to be proven 100% wrong.
Yeah, and I would as well. I have some of the same concerns, though. You have to think that nobody's going to buy Atlus without at least some vague understanding of what it is that makes Atlus successful. At least you would hope not. What makes that company successful is its dedication to just not necessarily worrying about, whether or not an American audience is really going to care about something like Xenoclash or Etrian Odyssey or, to an even bigger degree, stuff like Persona and the other Shin Megami Tensei games and stuff. Like, those are not things that you can just market to a mass audience. There is a strong audience for those games, and there's definitely a lot of interest in them, and justifiably so. They're well made and they're interesting and people like them. But they are willing to kind of just be like, look, these are the games we make. These are this is the audience we're cultivating. People like this stuff. People buy them, obviously. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to keep putting out games in America and other territories that are so kind of specifically niche. And so the hope would be that Sega understands this, realizes that their operation and what they do works. I mean, from what I understand, they were the only profitable part of that entire Index Corporation, which was their parent company. So it's like, obviously something was working there. I don't know why you would buy them and then immediately start saying, well, we're not going to put that out here, we're not going to put that out, or I don't know, that seems really weird. Why don't you not make that? Because that totally is the antithesis of what Atlus is. They're weirdos who make weird games, and they're great for being how weird they are, and that's why people like them. So hopefully Sega gets that.
Yeah, and I think probably the big moment for this will be Persona 5, which has been in development for a pretty decent amount of time. I think how Sega handles Persona 5 may say everything about what the future of Atlus is under Sega. But this is a Sega that announced and showed Phantasy Star Online 2 at PAX, and then has said absolutely nothing about the future of that.
Right.
That bothers me. If they didn't want to release it, fine. Say you're not going to release it. But that's a really weird way to handle a game that was certainly anticipated by a lot of fans of that series. And fans help define what Atlus is. Fans have helped champion Atlus to the point that they are at now. And if Sega does a poor job of cultivating those people, then it will sort of all be for naught.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily convinced that they are going to screw it up. I mean, Sega, for all the weird shit that they do and all the weird problems that they have occasionally, they don't seem as intensely destructive as they have in the past, like they're at least self-destructive. So I don't feel like I really don't think they would pay $140 million for this company and then just start like completely dismantling their operation as it exists. I imagine that what they're going to do is hopefully just throw some of their own marketing weight behind what they're already doing. Just let that division do what it's going to do. When Persona 5 comes along, throw some money at it, see if that helps it at all, or if it just continues to do what it's already been doing, and then you can decide how you want to approach it from there. They have other games, but they're not going to have anything as big as that for a while. So, just kind of let them do their thing until that comes along. Let that be the thing that you kind of throw your weight behind, and then see where it goes. That's what I'm hoping for, anyway.
Well, at this point, it is all speculation, so we'll just have to wait and see.
Indeed. Headlines. Andrew Wilson is now the CEO of Electronic Arts.
He is, yeah, the former head of, well, at this point, former head of EA Sports.
And also Origin. So,
Right.
yeah, so he's been with the company since 2000. He's still relatively young at 39 years old. Kind of a new guy. Not a dude that I know a whole lot about other than kind of seeing him come out and talk about sports games on their thing. Our friend of the site, Eric Pope, made a very astute observation on Twitter the other day, which is that pretty much all video game executives are the exact same person. So I'm not necessarily expecting a whole lot different out of someone like, say, Andrew Wilson, other than the fact that he is younger, so maybe he has some perspectives that people like, Riccatello and Larry Probst and Peter Moore might not necessarily have. But I'm also not expecting any radical changes in that business whatsoever out of this. I don't know how you feel about it.
No, I never met Andrew Wilson, so I don't have a whole lot of particularly insightful thoughts about him, except to maybe also underscore the youth angle. That
Right.
maybe that can be a factor. I think having someone that is just under 40 in charge of one of the most important third-party game publishers worldwide. I mean, what that means for the future of EA financially, I don't know, but I think it is exciting and interesting that someone that young would be given the reins rather than finding someone to come from the outside. They found someone young, and maybe he had a good pitch. Maybe he had an interesting vision for the future of the company. I don't know how that jives up with what we want, sort of as a gaming community from EA. I will say they put up a brief blog post from Andrew Wilson up on EA's site that was super confusing in the sense
sort
that,
of meaningless overall, I think.
well, I just didn't know who it was targeted at. Like, it was written as though it was, the way it seemed to be contextualized was this was supposed to be a message from Andrew Wilson to like gamers. But the way it was written was though it was written for stockholders. Like, it was just impenetrable language and confusing. It did not strike the right tone. But I just didn't understand who that was for. Like, the stockholders can get notes like that in other ways. Putting up that on the website as the first public declaration from the new CEO, just, I don't know.
It was a little odd.
Yeah, and they probably neither here nor there, but definitely a little bit strange. But yeah, I guess we'll see. I don't think we'll see any real impact from a new CEO for a little bit of time. Things are kind of already in motion in terms of probably the next 18 months. But I think maybe around next E3 is a time that we might get a sense of what, if any, changes are happening at the company.
Yeah, he's going to be leading that super awesome EA press conference that they have every year, so we'll see how that goes. Because those are always the best. Those are always the best press conferences, totally.
Yeah, and we'll see what this means for the future of Peter Moore.
I imagine the future of Peter Moore is Peter Moore just doing more of what Peter Moore does for a while. That's my guess. Got any more big headlines before we move on to the small stuff and the questions?
Well, I think Wii Sports Club.
Yeah.
Nintendo bringing back Wii Sports. Wii Sports was the defining piece of software for the Wii that I think for many people essentially, completely defined what that platform was, what the controller was, what Nintendo's aims were by kind of swerving to the left with their new hardware platform. And they didn't have a Wii Sports HD at launch. I don't think it would have made much sense, even if that was sort of a logical checkbox to hit, because the gamepad has nothing to do with what the Wiimote was all about. And so, if people haven't seen, Wii Sports Club is basically an online sort of software that has leaderboards and online multiplayer. You can download that for free, and then within that, you purchase individual games. So bowling and tennis, easily the most popular sports in the Wii Sports bundle, will be available in November. I believe November 7th?
I think they said
yes, November 7th.
$10 each for each one, right?
$10 to purchase them separately, sort of all access permanently. You can also spend $2 to get access to all of the sports for a single day. And then there will be variations of free trials available once you've purchased at least one sport. They haven't exactly detailed what that means, but if nothing else, this does seem like Nintendo experimenting with alternate pricing models as they start to dip their toes into downloadable content and something like this, like kind of a Wii Sports subscription service in a way. You know, not dissimilar to what some experiments have been done with karaoke games and video games, where you just sort of get access to it. You know, if you just got some friends over, then you can just, you know, play tennis for the evening without having to actually shell out $10. I think it's an interesting idea. I'm curious how successful it would be. I don't know if the addition of online multiplayer and leaderboards means very much. I think those are interesting, but I know that when I played Wii Sports, I never cared about my long-term score. I only cared about the score in the moment with the people I was playing with in the room. I never played Wii Sports and thought, gee golly, I wish I could play with my friends out in New York, right? Like, that game was defined by the physicality, and I don't mean that just in the way that you were swinging the controller, but in that people were in a space with you.
You're in a room full of drunk friends who are all trying to bowl with this weird device that they sort of only have the best tangential grasp of, and that is half the fun, is watching people totally fuck up while bowling in the room with you.
Yeah, like the constant, they bring it behind their back and then release the button and then drop the ball on the behind them. And so, you know, I think it's logical to add these features, but I don't know how much it actually makes a difference. It certainly doesn't move the needle for me at all in terms of something I would want out of that. So, but you know what? I bet I will download that, and I will at least get tennis or bowling. I think bowling is the one that I would actually return to again. I do like bowling, and it's expensive to go actually bowling, and not everyone likes to real life bowl. So having HD bowling around actually might be something I would invest in.
I agree, and that's probably all I'm going to do is just download that, just get the bowling game, and then never touch any other stuff. Because honestly, none of the other Wii Sports games ever really did that much for me. It was always just bowling. So yeah, that's probably what I'm going to stick with personally.
Yeah. Let's see. Is there any other major headlines? Well, I've been writing about pretty consistently about the Ouya, and something we talked about either earlier this week or last week was the Free the Games Fund. If you aren't aware, Free the Games Fund was $1 million that Ouya had set aside to invest in independent games. So, but part of the way it was structured was that you went onto Kickstarter, and if you raised $50,000, they would match however much you raised past $50,000 up to $250,000. And then the one that raised the most amount of money would get an additional $100,000. The rules were very vague, and people started finding some pretty significant loopholes right off the bat. You had the Gridiron Thunder, which is a not-so-great-looking football game that's being made in 3 months. 3 months? That raised a bunch of money very quickly from friends, family, and Silicon Valley friends. And then they qualified for the matching funds. And then most recently, you had the Kickstarter's name escapes me, but they'd only raised a very little amount of money, and then the main designer's father decided to kick in a pretty significant check to several different people. They spread out the check and then used that to back it and get it over $50,000, which then qualified them for the Free the Games Fund. And all of this went against the spirit of this program, and they came under some pretty significant criticism from some major developers. And they were when they did respond, they basically said, eh. But then the criticism got dialed up even hotter, and they finally did a complete overhaul of the program that I think is really meaningful. You know, some of the big changes are it's now 10,000 instead of 50,000. You have to have a certain number of backers per $10,000 that are contributed to your fund in order to continue receiving the matching, so that you can't just have 4 people fund your project and get all the money. You no longer have to be exclusive to Ouya in the first 6 months. The way the exclusivity works out is that for, I think it's every $10,000, that's 1 month, up to 6 months. And even on top of that, you can release on the PC at the same time, which was one of the big complaints for folks was a lot of folks, you know, wanted PC versions of those games, and it was limiting the reach by not having that. So, you know, whatever you think of Ouya, whatever you thought of the program, I think these are the meaningful changes that should have happened, and the idea of someone going out with $1 million and backing up cool independent games, that helps everybody. even if the Ouya is not that interesting of a platform.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be completely honest with you when I say every time we start talking about the Ouya, I have to resist the urge to have my eyes just kind of roll back into my head a little bit and just start like melting my face off, like, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark style. These all seem like relatively decent changes, smart enough changes, but you know, the fundamental issue at the core of all this is that it just seems like the people who are, you know, running this stuff and designing this stuff aren't really thinking about these kinds of things to begin with, which is pretty bad, and not a very good indication of where things are headed with that platform. I'm glad that they have, you know, fixed this stuff eventually, but it just, I don't know, man. I can't. On no level can I get behind the Ouya at this point. I'm not even sure that I have anything meaningful to say about this entire topic other than, well, good for them, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
I continue to be fascinated by it, and that is definitely a large part of the reason why I continue to cover it, because this is certainly the first wave of, for better or worse, a series of micro consoles, as they have now been branded, that are coming in the months ahead. So, in any case, yeah, why don't we? I'll at least say now, if people have questions, start shooting them to me in the chat as we run through a bunch of headlines really quick, and then we will answer some questions before we get out of here.
Indeed. All right, let's. I got a few down here. $800 million in early revenue for Grand Theft Auto 5. Patrick, how overblown and meaningless is this number?
It is not completely meaningless, but it
Right.
does. I tried to get clarification from Take-Two and failed to do so, which does not surprise me in that there are retailer cuts and hardware manufacturer cuts that come out of the number they are citing, or would most likely come out of the number they are citing, and so that $800 million number is not entirely truthful.
No.
And so what that actually is probably still a really big number. You know, I'm not disputing that Grand Theft Auto 5 didn't have a really big week. It absolutely did. But I find it problematic, and this is why we shy away from publishing things like this pretty often, that there's a reason that they're bragging about that number. It's because they are spinning it in a certain way to make it sound impressive. Activision does the same thing every single year. So Rockstar is not alone in doing things like that. But you know, I tried to ask them if I could get any clarification on what that meant for the retailer cut and for the hardware manufacturer cut, and you know, no big surprise, they did not get back to me about that, because they were wildly successful in getting that number published pretty much everywhere. Which, you know, it tells you part of the story, but doesn't tell you the whole story. And if
It's a really good clickbaity number.
Yeah, and if we can't get those, you know, those other clarifications, it's, you know, we don't need to publish all this stuff. So it's nice that we can be in a position to say, like, well, that's nice, but you know, we don't have to put that up on our site.
Indeed. The separation of Activision Blizzard from Vivendi has been halted by a court. Patrick, how upset are you about a major corporation and its shareholders denying the independent publisher, Activision and Blizzard, the independence they so desperately crave?
If there was some way to get a single tear to roll down my face using Google Effects, I would do it.
But you can't.
I don't know. I can look. That's pretty good.
That's about the best I can muster out of that. Sorry.
I probably should have looked earlier. Like, I can maybe do this.
It doesn't really react to anything that you're.
Well, I'm sure that's going to sound really good in the recording.
Yeah, it's going to sound great. You're doing great work over there, Patrick Klepek. Last one that I've got. The PlayStation 4 will apparently launch in South Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan before Japan. Is this insulting to Sony's home nation, or is this just, you know, the logistics of things?
Yeah, I think that is probably indicative of continued launch logistics that we will learn a whole lot more about, you know, as we get closer to the launch of both of these machines, and we see how well allocations are going, how good yields are going, and what that means for, you know, people's ability to get that stuff, you know, out. I mean, we're gonna hear more and more stories like this, I think, as we get closer, for sure.
Totally.
That's
all I got.
Okay, couple quick ones. Campo Santo, a new studio formed by The Walking Dead's Jake Rodkin and Sean Vanneman. They were the lead designers on on that project at Telltale. Lead designer Nels Anderson on Mark of the Ninja, and artist Ali Moss are forming their own studio based in San Francisco, but Ali is staying in the UK and Nels is staying in Canada. Could not be more excited for the four of those guys and whoever joins them to make a thing.
That is a spectacular grouping of talent that that definitely gives me the tingles when it comes to anticipating what the hell they might be working on. So
yeah,
good on them.
And then definitely for Walking Dead fans, of which I am certainly among them. One of my favorite games from last year. By all accounts, from what I have heard, they spent a significant amount of time making sure that Season 2 was in place and that there were good people there to kind of continue what they started. And I've heard nothing but really good things about where Season 2 is headed. So seems like
is that
Season
still
2
coming in this year? Do we know?
It's supposed to. Yeah, it's definitely supposed to. My guess is we're going to hear about it next month.
The Wolf Among Us, the Fables first episode is, I think, next month. So that'll be coming out around the same time, hopefully.
Diablo 3's auction house is closing. I didn't play that game, but people seem to hate that auction house, so that seems like maybe too little too late. But
they didn't even put it in the console version, right?
No, and that's part of the reason they're taking it out as part of this new Loot 2.0 system that is a giant rebalancing. I really like how this PS3 to PS4 upgrade program is going to work for retail and digital games. I'm not sure if you saw how that is actually going to play out, but basically for Assassin's Creed 4, Call of Duty Ghosts, Watch Dogs, and Battlefield 4, if you buy the PS3 version, then keep that disc, and that'll allow you to spend $10 to upgrade to the PS4 version. I think that is about as easy and a cheap of an upgrade pass as you could ask for.
It's the most reasonable, I think, situation you could possibly hope for.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not how I expected that to be handled.
We're so accustomed to console makers and game companies finding ways to fuck this up. Nintendo has certainly been a key player in the finding ways to fuck you out of content that you've already bought kind of industry, and certainly Microsoft and Sony have had their moments as well. So having an easy, kind of useful, relatively affordable method to do this seems wholly alien to how the video game industry typically operates, personally.
Yeah. So that's all I got. Let's see what we got on the question front.
Okay.
A lot of people asking about news we already hit at the end there. I like Popcans, Zelda HD Wind Waker. Any of you interested?
I am interested. I have not played Wind Waker since it, like probably within the year it came out on GameCube. I obviously played like the Phantom Hourglass and the other stuff on DS that used the similar art style and sort of continued in that universe. But it's been a really long time since I tried to play Wind Waker, and the changes that they have apparently made to this version, including some of the stuff with the sailing and that giant fetch quest at the end, sound like really smart, good changes that will probably make me like that game more than I even already like it. And I already like that game a whole lot. If it wasn't for that whole end game sequence, that would probably be easily my second favorite Zelda. As it is right now, it is competing with a couple of other ones, for that title. Just because, man, that sailing at the end and all those goddamn Triforce charts, you gotta fuck that shit. Fuck it.
Yeah, I have not played Wind Waker since it came out as well, but it's absolutely one of my favorite games, and I'm thinking that's going to be a perfect winter game. So yeah. I'm not really anxious to play it right now. That's mostly one of those things that once we get to December and I'm inside every day, that's going to be the right time to revisit that game. And I could not be more excited to do it. It's been just long enough that I've forgotten basically everything about that game, except the things that you mentioned that were frustrating. So I'm curious to see how they address that. And yeah, I'm excited to go back to it. So yeah, it is something that I want to play, but probably I'm not going to do so.
Probably not right away.
Later in the year. Armin Thorpe says, one of my favorite things to come out of GTA 5 was a quote from Brian Crescente that basically said that huge sales from GTA 5 speak so well against the normal publisher talk of game every year to make profit, rar rar. Good thing, question mark. You have to look at that in the context of Take-Two Interactive as a company, which every time you listen to their quarterly calls for the last 5 years, basically since GTA 4 came out, was, so when's the next GTA? So when's the next GTA? That's the first question. That's the first question out of any analyst, and it's taken Take-Two a long time to establish a company that can be profitable outside of a GTA year. You know, they didn't always have Borderlands. They didn't always have BioShock. They didn't always have XCOM. So it's taken a long time for Take-Two to nurture that stuff, and GTA has given them the leeway to do that. So even when they have years where they're not profitable, they can always say a new GTA is in development. Like, the GTA franchise is so core to what allows Rockstar to have the independence that they do and take the risks that they do, and for Take-Two to be a wholly unique company that doesn't, by and large, have year-over-year sequel fatigue that other companies suffer from. And I really admire that they're able to pull that off, and it's why even when I complain about aspects of the GTA series, the positives that it does in other areas I think are really important and worth noting. But I think that quote is certainly right, that part of the reason that GTA 5 is as big as it is because it's been so long since the last one. You built up the anticipation, and that makes people excited for a new one.
And I think it is absolutely great the way that 2K has, nurtured a lot of those other franchises and brands over the years. I mean, yeah, they didn't have that stuff for a long time. It was kind of like GTA was the only thing. And I think, it's something that's emblematic of their attitude, especially when it comes to stuff that wasn't necessarily working super well for them, like Spec Ops and, The Bureau. Those are games that, by all accounts, weren't going well, and other publishers might have just canceled. But 2K has sort of taken a different approach in recent years, and they've definitely they've instead of just canceling shit outright, they've been like, okay, well, what do you need to make this work? What do we need to do to rejigger this and make it into something? And for a lot of those reasons, that's kind of why I find 2K to be I mean, whatever, they're a corporate entity like any other corporate entity, but in terms of like what they put out, the way they push games, the way they develop games, I tend to find them to be the most admirable among the major publishers. I tend to enjoy, or at least appreciate, what they do more often than what I don't. And they have a couple of lemons here and there, but generally, when something from 2K comes out, I'm usually pretty okay with it. Baseball aside, because those things those have been garbage for years.
Let's see. A lot of questions we already addressed. I mean, I don't have a great answer for this. Maybe you do. Noman Fire, where do you think GTA should go next? Is there a location or a setting that you would like to see the GTA series go to?
Wait, read that question. Sorry, I got a text from Jeff while you were reading that.
Is there a setting or a city you would like to see GTA go to in the future?
I would like to see them go outside of America. And I know that GTA is inherently built around this notion of lampooning the American dream in various, contexts. The 80s and Vice City, the kind of gangster stuff in San Andreas, and then kind of the immigrant story in New York. Like, it's all they are hyper focused on this American dream thing. But I think, I mean, I haven't finished 5, but I'm already starting to get the sense that they have officially run the gamut on what they have to say about that. So it would be interesting to me to see them pick another locale outside of America. Doesn't really matter to me where it is. There are certainly cities I would love to see represented in games, but if there's another culture that they can sort of pick apart in some meaningful way and use that sort of like the kind of playground building and the world building that they have to do that, then I would love to see that. That would get me really excited for another GTA sequel. If they're just going to do Vice City again, or like make up some other city that they haven't done before, then that doesn't necessarily scratch the same itch that I'm kind of looking for. It doesn't feel, it doesn't have the same kind of feel to it that it would be if they did something really, really different. And I'm not just saying like London. Like, go outside your comfort zone. Find something that you're interested in, but not necessarily just what you're already familiar with. Because I feel like if those guys really want to take some risks, they need to start going after things that are not just the same general material that they've kind of been going after since 2001.
I think that's true. Hasoon asks, what about PS4 getting game capture via HDMI? That is a better question for someone like Vinny Caravella. But my guess is, I mean, for what I saw, I mean, so the basic idea is that there is encryption on the way that the video streams out of a PS4 and even an Xbox One if they chose to, and that means that you can't just connect that to a thing and capture it. I guess I don't know. I just know that was a problem, and then people complained, and then Sony said we are going to address it. You can do raw capture out of a PS4 that is not out of the Twitch or Ustream apps, but it's not going to be something that's there at launch. But my guess is that you guys shouldn't worry. Vinny and Drew are smart people. If that is, if there are limitations in place, hey, life finds a way.
They will find ways to destroy those limitations because they are gods among men.
Yeah, so I think that is going to bring us to a close. One thing that, do you have is we made it to the end of the show or that we're leaving?
I don't know. I just thought that was the right thing to do.
Alex and I are going to sit down. We meant to do it this week. Didn't quite happen. We're going to sit down and kind of talk about the format of the show. Not so much because it's not working, but more just, we've been doing this pretty consistently for a couple of weeks now. And so if people have any feedback, things they would like to see, things that aren't working, feel free to, send us a PM, say something on Twitter, ask me on Tumblr, what have you. But we're looking for feedback, thinking about new ways to structure the show. Especially like we're gonna, we had so much to talk about today, and then Monday, will be a little more troublesome. So unless some crazy news happens over the weekend,
maybe we can finally have Jeff Gerstmann on Monday because we've been meaning to have him on to talk about some stuff for a while, and that might be a good time to bring him in. But yeah, I mean, format-wise, we're not looking to change anything too dramatically. We just want to kind of make sure we have a good handle on what's working for people, what's not, and what we can add or subtract that would make it better. So yeah, by all means, hit us up, please, for the love of God.
Yeah, so for Friday, that is going to be the end of Bombin and the AM. Alex, I will see you on Monday, I guess, if I make it. If I make it.
A woo. Woo.